Take a look at these streets, frozen in place during the early months of 2020. The machinery of modern life stopped moving because of a threat we couldn't even see.
This is a message from the government. Coronavirus is a national emergency, life-threatening for people of all ages everywhere in the UK. To help save lives, stay home. Only go outside for food, health reasons, or work, but only if you cannot work from home. Stay home. Anyone can get it, and anyone can spread it. Stay home. Protect the NHS frontline staff working to save lives.
Our instinct is to imagine a threat this powerful as an invading force, something complex, resilient, and massive. In reality, SARS-CoV-2 is biologically minimal. It is a sequence of genetic instructions wrapped in a thin layer of fat. If it sits on a surface for too long, the environment alone disintegrates it. This raises a difficult question. How did a microscopic scrap of code, incapable of moving or eating on its own, manage to paralyze the entire world? The answer lies in its efficiency. The virus doesn't need to be strong because it knows how to hijack the complex biological machinery we already have. Transmission begins at the face. The virus enters through the nose or mouth and targets the epithelial cells that line the human airway. These human cells have receptors on their surface designed for routine biological signaling. The virus uses a protein spike with a precise molecular affinity for these receptors, allowing it to bind to the cell surface. Once the connection is made, the virus injects its own code. The cell cannot distinguish between these foreign instructions and its own natural genetic commands. The virus effectively repurposes the cell. Its original function is suspended, and the cell's internal resources are dedicated entirely to manufacturing viral clones. This continues until the cell reaches its limit. It ruptures, releasing thousands of new viral particles into the surrounding tissue to infect neighboring cells. This is exponential growth in action. One infected cell becomes 10, 10 become 100, and within a few cycles, the number of viral particles reaches the millions. Because this replication is microscopic and localized in the lungs, the body can be heavily compromised before the first symptom, a cough or a fever, is ever triggered. In critical cases of the disease, the primary cause of death is the systemic failure of the body's own defense mechanisms. The immune system relies on chemical signals called cytokines to coordinate a response. These signals tell the body exactly where to send resources and how many cells are needed to fight an infection. SARS-CoV-2 triggers an uncontrolled signaling loop known as a cytokine storm. The message for emergency help is repeated so loudly that the immune system loses its ability to target the threat accurately. Millions of immune cells flood the lung tissue simultaneously. Instead of a surgical strike against the virus, the response becomes a blunt, overwhelming force. Specialized cells called neutrophils arrive in massive numbers, releasing destructive enzymes. These chemicals dissolve healthy lung tissue just as quickly as they destroy infected cells. Killer T cells, overwhelmed by the chaotic chemical signaling, begin targeting uninfected cells in the vicinity, instructing them to undergo cell death. The resulting damage is self-inflicted. The immune response effectively strips away the internal structures of the organ it is trying to protect. This is the central paradox of the infection. The host's survival is threatened not by the virus's strength, but by the immune system's inability to stop its own counterattack. As the tissue is destroyed, the alveoli, the microscopic sacs that transfer oxygen to the blood, become saturated with fluid and cellular debris. This environment allows secondary bacterial infections to take root in the damaged tissue, leading to severe pneumonia. When the lungs can no longer transfer oxygen, mechanical support becomes a necessity. This ventilator represents the point where the biological system has failed, and a machine must take over the work of breathing. In most cases, the immune system manages to regulate itself and clear the virus. The difference between recovery and a critical outcome is often determined by the speed and intensity of that initial signaling storm. Because a small percentage of infections always result in this kind of failure, the focus shifted to the physical capacity of our hospitals. As you can see by these intensive care beds, medical infrastructure has a finite limit. Because the virus spreads faster than new hospitals can be built, the only way to prevent the system from being overwhelmed was to change the speed of transmission through collective behavioral shifts. The effort to manage the pandemic became a matter of scale. Success depended on slowing the biological math of the virus enough to keep the number of critical cases from exceeding the number of available beds. We left off with a virus multiplying deep inside a patient's lungs, triggering an immune response so violent it destroys the surrounding tissue. But pull back from a single hospital bed to an entire country, and the threat completely changes. It becomes a problem of mathematics. In epidemiology, the most important number is how many new people a single infected person goes on to infect. If that number stays above 1, the outbreak compounds. Every new case creates multiple new cases, branching out faster and faster. This compounding effect creates a trap. For weeks, the curve looks perfectly flat and manageable, right up until the exact moment it rockets vertically. The true danger of a highly contagious pathogen is its ability to multiply at a speed that vastly outpaces human reaction time. That mathematical speed slams directly into a hard physical wall.
Death is a reality in this situation, and we're there for people when the sometimes sadly inevitable happens.
Today, the reopening of Disney in Shanghai is allowing 20,000 people to do just that.
Medicine does not have infinite capacity. Every city has a strictly limited number of hospital beds, working ventilators, and trained staff available on any given day. In a fast pandemic, that vertical spike in infections translates to a massive wave of severe cases, blowing completely past the hospital's maximum capacity. When a system is overrun, the practice of medicine changes. Doctors are forced into impossible triage situations, where they stop asking who can be saved and start deciding who gets saved first. There simply isn't enough equipment to treat everyone simultaneously. Then a secondary collapse begins. As the wards overflow, the essential staff needed to run them are constantly exposed to extreme viral loads. Every time a nurse or physician falls ill, the total number of caregivers shrinks, worsening the crisis for the remaining patients. It becomes a rapid downward spiral. A surge of patients destroys the structural integrity of the very system designed to save them. In early 2020, the globe faced exactly this scenario. A fast-moving pathogen was accelerating globally, and society had absolutely zero pharmaceutical defenses ready to deploy. Without a medical cure, the only available defense was a behavioral one. By collectively changing how humans interacted, it was possible to intentionally manipulate the timeline of the outbreak. This video simulation shows how the virus is built at a microscopic level. Its genetic material is encased in a fragile outer shell made of lipids, which is essentially a layer of fat. When those lipids come into contact with common soap molecules, the shell completely dissolves. A thorough 20-second scrub with warm water and soap physically rips that protective layer apart. The virus is neutralized on your skin before it ever has a chance to enter your respiratory system. It sounds too basic to be a primary defense strategy, but washing your hands is a highly effective biochemical weapon. It breaks the very first link in the chain of compounding infections. Stepping up from biochemistry to the scale of human geography, the virus has another vulnerability. It requires physical handoff points to travel from host to host. Every conversation, handshake, and crowded room is a bridge for the pathogen. Mandating strict physical distance between people systematically burns those bridges. Standing 2 meters apart is an act of defensive engineering that deprives the virus of the proximity it needs to jump to a new host. The guidance to stay home operates on the same logic. By isolating, you create a massive spatial buffer across the entire community. That buffer actively lowers the ambient risk for the delivery drivers, grocery clerks, and paramedics who have no choice but to be out in public. The extensive quarantines and lockdowns that emptied major cities were never designed to eradicate the disease by force. They functioned as a societal emergency brake, applied forcefully to halt the math of exponential spread. The goal behind all of the closed businesses and isolated households was singular. Society was collectively manufacturing the one resource it completely lacked: time. When you zoom back out and look at the macro data, the results of that collective behavioral shift become clear. Look at this comparison chart. The fast pandemic is a vertical spike that shatters the hospital capacity line, but the second curve represents a slow pandemic. The total number of people who eventually catch the virus might be exactly the same, but the cases are stretched out over a manageable duration, safely below the threshold. In this slower timeline, the physical infrastructure of healthcare holds up. Patients who need beds get them. Ventilators are available. Doctors and nurses can rest, avoiding the systemic collapse that triggers massive casualties. The biological lethality of the virus remains exactly the same, but by slowing its speed, humanity removes its ability to overwhelm the hospitals. Buying all of those extra weeks and months allowed experts to work behind the scenes. That stretched timeline gave medical researchers the desperate runway they needed. It allowed scientists to sequence the virus, run large-scale clinical trials, and systematically test new treatment protocols on a global scale. All of that time purchased through collective isolation directly enabled the fastest development and rollout of a highly effective pharmaceutical vaccine in human history. A microscopic entity, essentially a packet of code wrapped in fat, managed to bring the most advanced global economy to a complete standstill. It forced every government to rewrite its basic playbook for public health. Surviving an outbreak is ultimately a test of collective sociology. The biology of the pathogen dictates the threat, but how many lives are lost depends entirely on human behavior. The question for the next inevitable pandemic is simple: will we be fast enough to hack the timeline again?